Hello, today we're going to look at creating a toString method. So in the previous video we created a constructor, the video before that we created some properties, and the video before that we came up with a game plan for creating this object. My point being, you are right in the middle of a series of videos, so if you're feeling like you want to see the beginning of this and where this came from, you should review those videos. In this video we're going to create a toString function. So in the last video, we created this constructor to initialize our objects. We created two instances of our objects. I would like to test these things out. I would like to see whether those properties are getting set the way I want them to get set. And a good way to do that is with a toString function. I mean, another way I could, well, I can and I can't. In another video, I was doing some echoes down here, like echo can name. And in theory, you could test the properties of your objects. But these are private, so I can't. I could make them public, but let's just stop messing around with that and talk about a toString function. So toString is a magic method. We're going to want to give it a public modifier because we want to be able to access this from outside the class. And toString is largely for testing your objects. It's a method, but we're going to call it a function. And it is called toString. Right? Method. Or magic method means it's one of those predefined functions. So this is going to be a method that doesn't have any arguments. So this method returns a string. That's all it does. It returns a print-friendly string. So everything that you would want to know about this object is something that we're just going to put into this string. So I'll show you how I do it. Working with objects and strings is a little weird, so I'll show you my recipe for this. So let's say I'd like to display the name, HP, and level of each player. So I will say my name is, and then I do a set of curly braces. My level is set of curly braces, and my HP is set of curly braces. So those curly braces do nothing, but they serve as a placeholder. So what goes here is going to be a reference to the current object. So if I'm printing Ken or echoing Ken, or I want to see what Ken's properties look like, then Ken's going to be calling this, and so I reference that with this, right? This meaning the current object, and that's going to be a name. And here I'm going to say this level, and here it's going to be this HP. So at this point you might see why I do those curly braces. When you're doing a complex string, you're going to have to do some concatenation, and rather than do concatenation, I'd rather do the curly brace thing, which allows you to do things that you can't do inside of a normal string. And it also saves you from having to concatenate. And you know, even beyond that, even if there wasn't a question of concatenation, those are the complex parts of this string. It just allows me to put a placeholder in there, which is just convenient. And so this makes it so I can test out my players now. So I can do echo Ken. So when you say echo an object, what you're really doing is calling the toString function, which is not straightforward, but I'm sure you've heard of toString before if you're at this point in your programming career, and that's basically what that means. toString defines what happens when you try and print out or convert an object to a string. So I will save this and I will run this. And when I reload this, I say, my name is Ken, my level is 1, my HP is 10. And that is good. Now this is a boring example because there's not a lot of randomness happening. But if we were doing more interesting things like generating random numbers, we'd get to see the range in which maybe our HP varied or something like that. Sure, I'll do the same thing for Sarah too, but you know how this is. Well, actually, I kind of know how this is going to go, and I'm not going to like it, but it's going to give me a fun thing to talk about. Oh, I don't know what I did. Something funny on 6. Oh, echo is not a variable. All right, so my name is Sarah. Right, you see that? My point is, okay, two things. One, I meant M, not N. Two, you notice how it runs together as one big unreadable string. The problem is, as it often is, you probably want a line break at the end of that. And I'm also going to put a new line character there. So that to be clear, that /n, that does nothing in terms of the output, but when you look at the source code, it makes the source code of the document more readable. I'll show you what I mean. You can see I've got two objects with different properties. Well, I mean, some of them are the same values, some of them are not. If I view the page source here, see how there's a space here? If I didn't have that new line character, it would all be run together in one giant line. And if you don't put new lines on your dynamically created HTML, it's just you're gonna have this just one string that spans over sometimes, I don't know, tens of thousands of characters, and it's just impossible to read. So those new lines give you breaks in your source code, because ultimately you are going to have to look at your source code sometimes to debug your whatever's happening in terms of your output on the screen. So at this, I managed to avoid the PowerPoint. I didn't intend to do that. So this is the last step we looked at. Step 5 was create that toString function, and that's what we just did. So toString doesn't do anything in terms of the final product, but toString allows us to test our objects and make sure that the properties are getting set up the way we want them to. And it's also probably worth circling back one more time and pointing out that this is a public function which allows us to access private properties. So when we were just trying to echo out properties down here like this, we were running into all kinds of problems with access modifiers, but through having a public method, it gives us access to those private properties. So that's a good example of access modifiers. In the next video, we'll start talking about getters and setters, and we're just going to keep adding functions or methods to this for a few more videos, and then we'll call it good. We're getting close to the point where you can do some cool stuff with this if you want to, and at some point I'm just, writing some methods, and I will stop soon enough, but I want to go over a few more magic methods, a few more custom methods, and then we'll call it good. So I hope you're enjoying the series. Thanks for watching.